Hi, boy.
You
Sorry,
okay?
mate. Just thought
Sorry?
I don't know who's pre-workout or I don't know if it is a pre-workout. I was trying to see if there's caffeine in there, but I don't know whose it was. It was on the rack. But I thought because we're training after this, we'll chuck it in this and
Nice.
sip it through the
Oh,
potty.
good luck.
Oh,
Hopefully it doesn't kill you.
I know.
Wanted to say,
Yeah.
congrats is in order for both of us.
Okay.
7 podcasts in.
Yeah.
80% of podcasts don't make it past 5.
Really?
5 episodes, yeah. They're well done.
Well done, mate.
We said we were going to be consistent, and
I know.
we've
And we
stuck
and
to
we
our
lost
word.
one as well, didn't we?
Yeah, we lost that one.
Yeah, but
let's
still
not-
good,
let's
though.
talk about it. Yeah,
Recorded even more.
yeah, exactly. Which is good.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah, so the recent podcast, because I've been ill, I was a bit late putting this week's
Yeah, all
podcast
good.
out. So
Yeah, well, you have a fever.
yeah, fucking horrible. I got it from a mate. We went. Told you I went climbing in Penavans.
Oh
and
yeah, how was that?
yeah, couldn't see further than fucking 5 foot in front of
Oh,
us.
fucking fuming.
Honestly,
So pointless, then, isn't
So,
it?
yeah, well, but it was pointless, but also quite fun. It was
Yeah.
freezing cold. There was loads of snow on the floor. It was
Oh,
slippery in
sick.
places. It was quite cool. We were just chatting absolute shit when we were up there. There was no one up there. But yeah, couldn't see 5 foot in front of you. Another thing, don't know if you've seen it this week. Do you know De Campo? Do you know who he is?
Oh, no, I don't.
Do you know who he is?
No, I heard it was kicking around some sort of. He's been cancelled or something, right?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
But I don't know who he is. He a chef?
Chef.
Oh.
You must have seen Gino and
Yeah, he's the. I think I do know him.
Fred and... What's that noise?
It's rain.
Wow, that's mental. Oh, good job we got new mics so to blank the old rain out.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been cancelled. And I thought that you'd be kind of... Because we're quite into like... Well, we think things like that are quite stupid, don't we, sometimes?
What happened?
So, I got this from the BBC. I read this on BBC yesterday because I hadn't read it properly. TV News published a number of allegations from an anonymous accuser who said that they had worked with De Campo on TV productions. BBC has not spoken to his accusers, nor has it verified their claims. They accused him of aggressive behaviour, using abusive language during outbursts on set and using sexualised language. And when I read that, so I don't know if you've seen much of De Campo, right? But the BBC kind of made him into a figure. He used to like dress in an apron with his ass out.
Okay.
And like Holly and Phil would be like make these comments towards him and stuff, and he'd be there cooking. So they were encouraging that kind of behaviour.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you've seen it. There's a clip going around of Mark Wright. Do you know who Mark Wright is? He was on The Only Way Is Essex. Like,
Right.
good-looking, striking man. And he went on what's that show that fucking women discuss on a panel?
Like Loose Women. Or
That's
something,
it,
is
So he went on
or
Loose.
Desperate Housewives or something like
that's
that.
it. So he went on Loose Women, right? And he's coming down and he goes to sit down with them. These women go in, they literally say, oh, get your clothes off, or something like that. It would be nice if you got your clothes off. So 4 or 5 50-year-old women. Imagine roles reversed.
Oh my god.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
Roles reversed. 4 or 5 50-year-old blokes. A 30-year-old woman comes down. They go on.
Get your tits out there.
Get your kit off. Like, imagine the
Fucking hell,
outrage
yeah.
with that. It's just, I just hate this double standard thing around
What,
cancel culture. And
You literally just described Gordon Ramsay then, right?
say that again.
That's
sorry.
you pretty much. So he's been cancelled for literally behaving just like Gordon Ramsay. Isn't Gordon Ramsay's whole image based around why
Like
Gino got
swearing.
swearing, aggressive,
Yeah.
and just being like really outrageous? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this like I hate it, this whole cancel culture, and it doesn't
yeah.
fucking add in, And you always feel like sometimes you're like treading on eggshells, and you can't be yourself in case you say something that's a bit out there. But I just think I hate it. I just hate it. I just wanted to hear what your opinion was. Now, but you don't even know what Gino is.
Sorry, mate.
It's all right.
Ruined the first
Yeah,
part.
it's okay. It's all good.
Yeah.
Should we dive into confessions?
Yeah.
Was there?
Got the sock?
Got the old sock. We're coming to the end of these now, so we're gonna have to think of a new
Format.
A new format to start
What do
the
you
old
think?
podcast with. That's mine for sure.
Oh no, this is mine.
Ooh.
So, yeah, this is mental. So when I was playing tennis before I played like decent low level pro events, I was playing for David Lloyd, and we had this thing called like Aegon Team Tennis, and it was like you have 4 guys and you play against other clubs, 4 guys, and you play 4 singles, 2 doubles, and then you sort of represent the team. So I was playing this one guy called Robin, and I should have won on paper easily, but it was a really tight match, and I was getting really pissed off. I'll preface this with saying I was probably about 19, so I was hot-headed as. And we went to 3 sets, and I got broke. I got broke to go 2-1 down in the third, and I was fucking furious. And there were loads of people watching, and I was really prone to throwing my racket when I was that age. Anyway, I threw my racket, and I was meant to throw it in the net. And I
Oh,
threw it,
yeah,
and it went.
yeah.
It was. I threw it, and it went over the net and hit him on the back.
Oh shit!
Yeah. So he came to the net, hit a volley, and then hit a volley winner, and then like turned around to go back to the baseline, broke me. As he hit like the volley winner, I just launched my racket, and it just went over the net and hit him in the back. And like my racket was like that, and then hit him square in the back. And then he just like sort of held his back, and he's like, oh. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm disqualified. If you hit your opponent like out of like a live point, hit him with a ball to racket or anything, you're just disqualified. So I was like, oh my God, I'm DQ'd. And then he just like picked up my racket, gave it back, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, don't worry. And then just gave it back, stone faced, obviously was really pissed off. And I was like, oh my God. So then I was really shaken up because I was like, loads of people are watching. I work at this club, like members are watching me. I'm trying to be this like example of a tennis coach. And then I didn't lose a game, and I beat him 6-2 in the third.
So you didn't get disqualified?
No, he didn't take the match. He
Really?
Didn't, yeah, he didn't take it. And then I literally won every game then.
Must have been even more for you,
I know.
for this terrible decision.
I couldn't believe it. That's shocking. I'm actually really embarrassed by that now.
Ah, you fucking do stuff when you're younger, though, don't
Yeah,
you?
I
You
know.
just regret it.
I just wish I didn't hit him in the back of the head.
Yeah, but they make a good story.
Yeah, I
right?
know.
They make a good story. So
I know. So I went through all my coaching then when I was in my like mid-20s, and I used to go real hard on my kids if they like threw their racket. And then, like, rewind a few years, and launch my racket at my opponent.
Fuck. It must be so tempting, though. I can just imagine how frustrating it must be if you're playing a good opponent and he's kind of not taking you for a ride, but you're like, I should be beating this guy, but I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
I can imagine the rage.
It's all of the build-up. It's like all of the stuff before it. When people are like, oh, yeah, you'll be on and off court in like half an hour, and you're like 90 minutes deep, and it's like a slog. So you already got like that pressure. And then people are going like, oh, what's the score here then? And they're like, oh, it's in the third set. And they're like, what? How's Jordan not won yet? And then you like every like point, then you get more and more angry. Yeah, it was horrible.
External pressure.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know.
So today
What's the topic?
You mentioned that you wanted to explore and talk about the argument that is. I guess it's not an argument, but it's understanding the difference, I guess, between different kinds of squats. So I know there'll be a lot of people who are watching this who will understand what the difference is in the different types of squats that we can do. I know you've got one that you want to talk about in particular. And I wanted to preface this by saying that when it comes to getting stronger, there are different types of squats that you can do that can add a lot more weight to your back almost instantly in some cases.
Yeah.
So do you want to unpack this? And
yeah, I think for simplicity, we'll just look at like high bar, low bar, and front squats, and them getting used in a training program and understanding the uses of them within a training program. We've spoken about it before, and the way that I see things is very like contextual, and it has to have specificity to like a task outcome. So like each variation of those squats will be better in different specific task outcomes, right?
Okay. So just so the viewers know, low bar squat and a high bar squat. The high bar rests. If you want to, we'll show. Yeah,
we'll sit on my lap, love.
Yeah, sit on my lap.
So high bar squat sits on top of the traps. The low bar squat sits below the traps on top of the rear delt shelf. And like, to me, that is as objective as it is. There's no gray areas. There's no blurred lines. There's a lot of powerlifters now that have like a semi-high bar squat or a super low bar squat, like below that. And to me, that's just improper like bar positioning. It is as objective as like the bar sits on these particular shelves. High bar on top of the traps, low bar on top of the rear delt shelf. And it's as objective as that. The reason why, like, I don't believe there is like more gray areas is because like when you look at the sort of biomechanical rules around like the upper back, the scapula, and the thoracic, the bar needs to be in a position where it's like stable and like still and locked in and secure, wherever sort of language you want to use. And if you're basically moving it away from those points, then there's an element of like instability there. And even if you have the bar super low down your back, you're trying to maximize a leverage, but you're sacrificing the stability of the shoulder joint, essentially.
So is that why most powerlifters, when you see them in the competition, will squat low bar? Because they're able to lift more?
Yeah, essentially.
And does
So
that come down to the stability thing that you were going
no,
on?
so it just comes around with like angles at that point. So the difference in terms of like if your goal, so if we go back to what I was saying at the start, specificity to like a task outcome, if strength is the goal, I would definitely be leaning towards putting people into a low bar squat. The bar then is sitting lower on their back, which is closer to the hip, which is what we call like a moment arm. Let's not talk about that. That's really shit for viewers to listen to. But essentially, what it does, it changes angle. So when people move, it's all about balance. So people are moving and they're trying to stay as balanced as they can, right? And their body's going to accommodate the bar in order to stay balanced. That's why you'll see some weird and wonderful movements, but it's trying to find the path of least resistance. So when someone has got the bar on top of the rear delt shelf in a low bar position, their torso is going to be ever so slightly like leant forward, for lack of a better term. And that is so that the bar is over the center of mass. So when you're looking at someone from the side, you'll see the bar is directly over the middle of their foot. So they need to be in that forward position. If they're in a high bar position and the bar is higher up on their back, they're not going to have as much forward lean. They'll stand more relatively upright, and then the bar's in the same place, right? So your body is finding that established balance point. So when you're in a low bar position and your torso is ever so slightly more forward leant, when you then go into a bottom of a squat, so once you break at the hip and the knee, so you go into hip and knee flexion, your hip is going to translocate back more, so more of like quote unquote hinge, and your knee isn't going to go as far forward in order for that bar to stay stable and centered over the center of mass, right? As a result of that, you're basically torquing the hips more, or there's more hip, we'll call it hip dominant. I don't really like hip and knee dominance like terminology, but we'll use it for the sake of the sake of like understanding the point. It's slightly more hip dominant, so then you can recruit more muscles in the glutes, which are a prime mover in the squat. You can use the lower back a little bit more. You can use the quads as much, but less so than what you would if you're in a high bar position. And that position is a little bit more advantageous to moving load because you've got more muscles going through it and the bar's not going through as much range.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's why the low bar is more biased to strength outcomes. The high bar squat can still have strength outcomes, but based on where the bar changes and where the center of mass is now, if you look at the high bar position and they go into a deep hip flex position, then for the bar to stay in line with the middle of the foot, the hips are not going to translocate back as much. They're going to come more down. And so in order to stay balanced, now the knees have to go further forward, right? So when the knees go further forward, now you're shifting the load from muscles away from like the posterior chain, like the hips and the glutes, and it's becoming more quote unquote quad dominant. So when it's more quad dominant, then you're getting more of a stimulus in your quads, right? So now this is going to favor people that do Olympic weightlifting because the positions are more relative to the weightlifting movements. It's going to favor CrossFitters, because those CrossFitters will be in relative positions that are more specific to a high bar squat. It's like thrusters, wall balls. It matches their sport a little bit more. And if you want to just grow big quads, it's going to be more advantageous to grow in big quads. If you just relatively narrow your stance and then put the bar high up on your back, it's going to be more of a stimulus in your quads. Therefore, you're going to get more of a hypertrophic effect in your quads then. And then you've got something like a front squat, which is even more anteriorly loaded. So you've gone from a low bar squat where there's more relative hinge in the torso. High bar squat is more upright. The front squat is the most upright because now it's directly over like sort of the mid to the front of the foot. So the person's going to be stood more bolt upright, and that's going to have the hips go straight down with the knees go even more forward. I would say this is definitely more reserved for people that do CrossFit and weightlifting only. I wouldn't do this even if you were like looking for hypertrophy in the quads, just because the loadability of the exercise now is much more reduced. People tend to high bar squat considerably more than they front squat, and then they'll get a greater stimulus in their quads, more loadable, which means then they get more of the sort of hypertrophic effect. Whereas a front squat, I would just reserve that for like specificity for the sport itself, for actual sport transfer. So the person gets a little bit more of like specific practice in that position. So it's not necessarily like one squat variation is best and rules all. It just depends on like what you actually want to get out of squatting in itself. What is like the task outcome that you want, and then putting it in and periodize it in your training is going to be like the best in terms of like, what do I want to get out of it and what am I going to sort of push forward from here.
So essentially, if you want to get a big squat, let's say your goal is powerlifting, low bar squat.
Yeah.
For 99.9%
Yeah,
of the people.
They're very, very rare that you'll find a person that's really strong that that does high bar squat. Like John Hack is like the sort of anomaly there, but he could fucking do an overhead squat and still have to squat everyone, you know.
And then a high bar squat then is generally good for, say, someone who's competent at squatting and wants to build a little bit of muscle. Maybe they've had a little bit of tendonitis in their elbow, so they need to stop training low bar for a little bit.
Yeah.
Gives their elbow a bit of time to recover without losing the squat pattern and the strength that they built with that. And generally for men who maybe just want to build a little bit of muscle.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a more entry level like squat than a low bar squat. Like the most entry level squat you can do, it's like a goblet squat. In terms of like learning pattern, you got a bit of a counterbalance with the goblet position.
Yeah.
It helps people move through space better because of the anteriorly loaded aspect of it. And then high bar squat from that. If people are generally quite new or they just want to get into squatting, high bar is more like comfortable for most people. But what I will say is like a tip for viewers is, regardless of how sort of flexible and mobile you are, always elevate your heels when you do high bar squats. That's like my top tip.
Nice.
It helps with just like holding position better, and it puts you in a better position for that outcome.
Cool, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then I guess the front squats then is, unless you do CrossFit or
if you
some kind
fucking-
of Olympic lift,
Or if you
generally stay away, because they're tough, man. Like front squats, I don't do them, but I remember when I used to, I'd always, whenever I'd go over a certain weight, my thoracic would start rounding, and just constantly feel like I was like being strangled.
Yeah.
It's not a great feeling, and I think just not the risk to reward, but the benefits to the exercise in comparison to other exercises you could do, like the leg press or the hack squat, leg extensions.
Yeah.
There's just better variations, I think.
100%. I think if you love a front squat, like do it.
Oh, yeah.
If your sport requires you to do a front squat, weightlifting, CrossFit, then you should do it. But yeah, in terms of like, if you ask the question like, why do you want a front squat? If the goal is hypertrophy, then yeah, it's probably not the best selection for you. But I also think as well, like for people that are invested in powerlifting, like powerlifting's my jam, I'll always talk through that context. People that are invested in powerlifting, there'll always be some element of squat in their training. So if they're in like a hypertrophy phase and they want to get bigger legs, like you probably should do a high bar, closer stance squat as like your squat. But ultimately, I feel like where you'll get most hypertrophic effect is, in my opinion, pendulum squat. People that know me and get coached by me will know I love the pendulum squat. And I think the loadability of the pendulum, the constraint of the machine having that external stability, not having the complexity of controlling your trunk and upper back, and just you can just go on it, flick the handle and just push real fucking hard, go super deep. Like that is gonna get that like task outcome the best, in my opinion. So
I love the hack squat.
yeah,
I really, really like the hack. I prefer it to the pendulum in terms
you?
of fun and how much I can push myself. I think it's less.
do my pendulum squat challenge. 50% of your body weight, 1 AMRAP set.
I'd be terrible at that.
It's horrendous.
Yeah, I remember because you did it as a challenge here before, and I just completely avoided it. I don't think I came to the gym for a week because I knew that challenge was on.
Amazing.
Fuck that. In terms of, you mentioned something that, so we've talked about exercise selection there. And I saw a video on TikTok the other day, and it was this guy, and he was like, if you want a body like me, just do these 4 exercises. And it took me all the way back to when I used to obsess over Men's Health magazine. And they used to say, if you want to get that V-taper look, bench, overhead press. And it was like, do a barbell bent over row.
Yeah.
And then something else. I can't remember what it was. And I just remember thinking it was like, right, these exercises are what are going to get me bigger and more muscular and add mass to my frame. And then the older you get, you go, well, no, I could do those fucking exercises till the cows come home and not build muscle because I'm not doing or following or applying these underlying principles that build muscle. And I think that's so true in this day and age. People will be on social media, they'll see these wanky exercises, and they look cool, they look fashionable, they're in, but it's like, okay, but that person who's building that muscle, what that person did to build muscle in the first place is not what he's doing to sustain that physique.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And then it's a case of, okay, well, what does build muscle? Because I know a lot of guys watching this will have heard what we've just talked about, and they'll be like, cool, okay, so if I want to build muscle for my quads, I want to do a high bar back squat. Yeah, that's generally probably the exercise that you should pick out of those 3 squats. But without applying these principles, you're not going to build muscle. So I wanted to explore those principles today, because I know there's two that we talk about a lot. One of them is basically a fancy way, a progressive overload, which is just a fancy way of saying lift more. And then the other one is mechanical tension, which is just another fancy word of saying train fucking hard, right? So I wanted to explore these today and kind of explain to these people that these programs that they're following, they're not getting results of them because they're not applying these principles. So do you want to unpack what progressive overload is in very simple, basic terms? And I'll do the same then with mechanical tension.
Sure. So progressive overload is essentially just doing more than before. So done. And doing more than before isn't just in the context of load. It's not like you can just add 1 kilo a week and then go on forever. Otherwise, I'd be dumbbell benching like fucking 250 kilos each arm. I wish.
Exactly.
So it's not doing more load than before. It's just doing more than before. So sets, reps, load, volume, all that sort of stuff is a consideration. So at the most sort of like basic level, if you did program A and then you did program A again, but you just added 1 rep to 1 exercise, that is an element of progressive overload, right? Because you've done more than before. So obviously you wouldn't do that. It's not the most optimal program, but like that's as like simple as it gets. Manipulating variables around sets, reps, and loads, going through phases of training will allow you then to do more than before. And if you do that, you'll get stronger over time.
Yeah, nice. And I think something that can break that down further is looking at how much you're lifting through tonnage and volume. A lot of people look at it through like sets and reps. I'll add a set on this week.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they're doing 7 sets of 10 reps, which is a lot of work to do. So something that I like to do with my clients is like, okay, let's look how much you've actually lifted in terms of volume in comparison to week 1 and week 5. So let's say they're doing 3 sets of 10 at 100 kg in week 1, then they've lifted 3 sets of 10, 100 kg.
This is your story, mate.
900 kilograms, right?
Yeah.
So then 3 sets of 10. 1 set of 10 at 100 kg is 1,000 kilograms.
Yeah.
Sorry. So it's 3,000 kilograms that they've lifted. Then let's say in week 5, they're doing 5 sets of 10 at 100 kilograms. They're now lifting 5,000 kilograms. That's a 2,000 kilogram difference that they're lifting. And it's like, that's amazing. That's 2,000 extra kilograms that you're now lifting compared to what you were doing before. That's how your muscles grow. And I think a lot of people don't understand this. You don't have to look at those numbers in so much detail.
Yeah.
But I just think it's always good to know that looking at things from like a tonnage standpoint is a good way to be like, okay, am I lifting more? Am I putting more tonnage and more strain onto my body? Cool. If you're doing that, probably going to be building muscle as long as all the other variables are in place, like your diet, your sleep, you're recovering well, and you're not doing too much. Do you think have you found that there's like a sweet spot between how much more volume people should be aiming to lift, either in a weekly basis or a monthly basis?
So I personally don't track tonnage. I've done it for so long, I just know, and because like my sport is powerlifting, is very like load dependent. Like the variable we want to get increase is load on the bar. So like the phase of training, the way that I program now is actually like low volume for what most people are programming now. And then the intensity and the exertion is much higher, which we'll talk about in a sec with mechanical tension. The exertion is a little higher. So I'm really focused now on like technical competency and application of that competency into specific movements with high intensity, and then pulling the volume back to allow the expression of the technical part of it to be really, really good, and then building a lot of like stress, like 1 to 2 RIR, not really going above 2 RIR in the accessory movements, and just doing 2 hard sets from there, and then understanding how like long it takes for like fatigue to dissipate before giving it another exposure. So like that's the sort of way that my programming is sort of evolved into now, is very much like lower volume, high intensity, relatively specific movements. I tend not to steer too far away from the movements. So like when people are sort of training like this now, and they're cycling through the phases of training, I sort of know how much volume and what sort of rep range to sort of like work towards. And then I know sort of where the load is trending based on like previous phases of training. So as a result of that, it's so much easier for me to then foresee and project like improvement, because I know like my programs go in that way. I don't necessarily need to sort of extrapolate like tonnage and be really like
granular with a number.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like you've been doing it for so long, you're subconsciously tracking tonnage and volume,
Yeah, and exactly.
without actually tracking it.
100%. And then when I put them through the phases of training, say like, let's just use arbitrary numbers. Say they went from like a 150 kilo bench, and then they trained for so long, and now they're up to like a 160 bench. I know that when they recycle back to the volumes and the programs that they would have done similarly before, I know that I'm going to increase their training max. And then when I increase their training max, that tonnage naturally goes up, and they're going to be doing more than before because they've gotten stronger and they've recycled through a phase of training and la 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 la.
Yeah.
So it's relatively straightforward for that. But do you want to unpack? So that's progressive overload in a nutshell. Do you want to unpack mechanical tension?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is this infuriates me sometimes when guys say, "I'm going to the gym, but I'm not seeing results." I say, "Okay, cool. Let's see you train." And you see them train, and they're just 10th rep. They're the final rep. No expression on their face. Their face isn't going red. There's no grunting. There's no need to like work hard. And it's like, okay, yeah, so you're going into the gym and you're training. That's amazing. That's like a great first step. Like you're doing better than 90% of people who are sitting on the couch. But when you're now in the gym, you need to fucking train hard. And I think some people, whether it's down to lack of confidence, whether it's down to lack of belief, they don't think that they can go kind of heavier and train harder, or they're scared that they're going to fail and hurt themselves, or they mistake like feeling a burn of the bicep curl to like the tendon ripping off and like exploding. They don't then train hard. They think it's like dangerous. It's like, no, bro, like your body can handle a lot of stress and strain. And it's important to know that when you do train, you have to train hard. And I think this is where mechanical tension comes into play then. I think I've used an analogy before with my clients for them to understand it. They're like, I get mechanical tension now. So what analogy that I've used before is if you imagine like a bridge, and the bridge has got cables holding it together. And the more cars that are going over the bridge and the stronger the wind are, the harder the cables then have to work to keep the bridge at bay. And it's very similar to when you're lifting a weight. It's not a great analogy, but I think people understand it. When you're lifting a weight, your body, depending on how much heavier you go, how close to failure you're going, your muscles have to kind of work harder to lift that weight up. And that's essentially like mechanical tension in a way. And whenever we try and induce some kind of muscular growth, we want to be taking a set. I think the research suggests taking a set anywhere shy from 1 to 4 reps of failure. So if, for example, you finish the 10th rep and you think to yourself, I think I probably could have got maybe 1 or 4 more reps out, then you know that set has probably been an effective set to build muscle. Now, the caveat to that is that some men, when they train, especially so a lot of what I do is I get my clients to send me videos of them training. I know you do something similar as well. And they finish that 10th rep and I'm like, okay, your program stated that you should have had 4 reps in reserve. I'm looking at your video. If I was there with a gun to your head, standing next to you, telling you to fucking keep going, I think you're getting another 10 reps out of that, right? And that's where sometimes men just don't think they think they're training hard. And women as well, they think they're training hard, but they're not actually training hard enough for muscle to grow, and that's why they struggle to build muscle. Is there anything that you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, so like a couple of things. So the first thing when you start saying about people not training hard is, like we spoke about it before, about like culture changes. I don't know if this was on the podcast that didn't get aired, but essentially like people go through cycles of like, you know, low frequency main lifts, high like output and accessories, and then we're in this phase now where everyone's doing like SBD days and super high frequency, and then it's like cycling back around again, and people are starting to go slightly lower frequency. So we go through these cycles, and it did the same thing with like people used to train really really hard, and then it got really like popular to be like, oh, you're just maxing out. Every time you go to failure, you're just maxing out in the gym. You need to leave reps in reserve. And then people took it so much to the other end where they're like, yeah, I train sub-maximally. And they're like, oh yeah, it's like sub-max boys, you know, like, oh, just do like all this sub-max training. And I used to, bro, I used to say it. I'd be like, oh yeah, sub-max, so I move really, really well. You know, I accumulate volume and it's all this sort of fucking fancy bullshit. And I used to love it, and I used to like post on it, and I just used to put like hashtag submax or like hashtag boring matters, you know, like just doing the boring stuff. I'm not maxing out, I'll max out when it matters, and all this sort of like nonsense. And now it's coming back around where like obviously like there's a lot of people like Dr. Mike Israel that talks more about like, you know, reps in reserve, going close to failure and stuff. But then obviously the downside of that is it's subjective. It's like you say RP8, I'm feeling RP8. Subjectively, I think that's an RP8 or 2 RIR, and then I re-rack it, and you're like, no, you've got more than that. So like your subjective opinion of how it looks is like you've got more reps, whereas my subjective take is going to be like, no, I've got 2. So someone like Brad, like, is a pussy in the gym, and I
So
hope he listens
Brad
to this.
being
My best mate.
my brother-in-law,
Yeah.
slagging him off.
I know. Not my clients. Don't talk to my
No,
clients like that.
he's a princess. He's
Princess,
a princess,
right?
Yeah.
So he's
but,
on a
strong.
Yeah.
We'll give him that. He's strong.
He was on a pendulum the other day, and I was like, do 8 reps. Put 20 and a 10 on. He did 1 rep, and he was just like, no chance. And he went to wreck it. And I was like, just keep going. So then I put my hand behind it as if like I was helping him. And I was like, come on, come on. He moaned all the way through it, did 8 reps, and probably had like 2 to 3 RIR. And then he was going to like, just tap out straight away. So subjectively, the princess was like, this is too heavy, too hard, and he wasn't able to push. So what I do sometimes with my clients, if like they're in a like specific phase where muscle growth is the goal, I'll be like, okay, you're on week 4. You've got pendulum squats. You've got 2 sets of, 8 to 10 with a 1 RIR. Just do 1 set and take it to failure.
Yeah, I do exactly the same.
And I'll get them to use the same load, right? So say they like do 2 plates on the pendulum squat, and they've done that for like 2 sets of 8, and they said that was 2 RIR. I'll say do 2 plates again, so the same load, and then just do 1 set of failure, and then they'll do like 15 reps. So they're like, cool. So when you did 8 reps, was it really 2 RIR? Now you know sort of like what hard training looks like, and then they can use that as like, okay, now I understand that there's a lot more in my
I can give
tank.
more. That's empowering, I think, for a lot of people. It's like I've got more in me. I've got more, and I feel like people nowadays are very much. I don't know where this has come from. I definitely notice it with my skinny fat men. Very, very little belief in themselves.
Yeah.
Just so like, I don't want to. It's like, no, bro, you've got so much potential in you. Like, I don't know what has created these men who are just like just don't believe in themselves. So I think getting clients to take sets to failure is so empowering for them.
Yeah, it's just proof.
So much more.
Yeah, it's just
so
proof
much
that
more
you're
to
strong.
give. Yeah.
It's just it's like showcasing their strength in just like a little snippet. It's like, oh yeah, you thought that 8 was 2 RIR. You just did 15 reps, man. You're so much stronger than you think. We'll fucking wait on next week, lazy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think that's nice. I think hopefully people have understood the.
And relate.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just a pussy as well, though,
Oh,
and I'll
100%.
load it up, and I'll just be like, I know this is not going to be 2 RIR. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
I just don't want to go there. And sometimes you're like, your body will ache, and sometimes you should like pull it back slightly if you're feeling particularly uncomfortable. Sometimes you should. You just don't want to make that the norm.
No, for sure. Cool. It's last question then, because we always like to finish the podcast on a question, and that this week's one is: if you could go back to speak to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give? Don't throw rackets at people's heads.
Oh my god, yeah. I would probably. I'm trying to think. What was I doing at 18? I wasn't doing much when I was 18. I was playing a little bit of tennis, but I remember being really lost at that age. Like wasn't sure the direction. I was playing tennis and I was like ambitions of becoming pro. I think I knew deep down I wasn't going to make it. I didn't want to coach because I felt like every failed tennis player turned into a coach. And then I was like, and I wasn't in education then either, and I didn't have much education to like go to uni or anything. So I felt like I was in a bit of a slum. So I don't know what I would say to myself to sort of keep me on track. What I would probably like to do, reframe the question and go back earlier, and I tell myself to fucking listen in school.
Would you?
And I wasn't good in school at all, and I used tennis as my like get out of jail card to be like, well, I got tennis, so I'm gonna be fine. Just like super immature, super arrogant, and I feel like I wasted like a lot of potential in school.
What, as in academically?
Yeah. But like, so I say that because I like my wife's a teacher, so I've got to say that I value like the education system, but I don't think it would have changed my outcome anyway. So if I listened in school and I like changed sort of my pathway there and went to uni, I don't think I would be in a different position that I sort of am now.
You think you'd be in the same position?
I think I'd be in the same position. So I don't think it would have necessarily changed anything, but I think it would have given me a slightly different like perspective, and I think I would have got to the point that I'm at now in terms of like delving deeper into like the business side of things, developing into like just like personal growth. I think I would have just done that earlier. I think from like sort of 18 to 25, I was very like selfish and arrogant, and I think like I could have developed better qualities of myself earlier and maybe been in a slightly more fortunate or ahead of where I am right now, you know.
I think we
But
all think that, don't we? Oh,
Yeah.
if I'd have done this, I'd be further ahead now. But life
Yeah,
doesn't work.
I
like
know,
that.
I
You're
know.
exactly where you're meant to be.
yeah, exactly.
100%. I
Yeah.
live by that motto.
So it's almost like I'd just be like, hang in there. So I felt lost. I felt
Hang in
like,
there.
yeah,
Yeah, that's nice.
that's
I
what
like
I'd say.
that. Just
Yeah,
hang in there, yeah.
like I was a bit lost. Didn't really know what I was doing. I was trying to find some sense of clarity. I was a bit like rebellious. So it was like I'd just be like, stop being a twat. Hang in there. You'll come out. You come out the other side.
Yeah. I think mine's exactly the same as yours.
Oh, is
So
it?
I went on a psychedelic retreat. Yeah, similar to yours. I went on a psychedelic retreat a few years ago, 2021, coming up to 3 years to actually. I just had this realization. So I took a high dose of psychedelics and just had this realization that like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Just pure, like everything that's going on, everything in the end works out. And you'll be fine. Even if it doesn't work how you want it to, it will still be fine.
Yeah.
You know, even if someone passes away, you'll find a way to get through it. And the other thing is just like trust your intuition. With that little voice that you sometimes pick up that says, "Oh, don't do it like that. Do it like this." Like trust it because
Yeah.
it knows what it's doing. And I think there's something there that's guiding us. I know that's quite spiritual and quite.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? There's something there that's guiding us.
So for me, I just think that. Again, we can probably I could talk about this for a while, so I'll try and condense it as short as I can because I know you want to go and train. But there's a self and an I, and by that I mean this is none of my realizations. This is Carl Jung's work. He's a psychologist. Is he a psychologist? Or he does something anyway, about the brain and like the ego and the self, and he talks about those two things separately, whereas the ego is driven by the I is driven by the ego, but the self is driven by more like a spiritual side of you, something that like that is already premeditated for you. So just follow it, kind of thing. That's just describing it in a very, very crap way. I'm articulating it very, very poorly there, but yeah, for me that self is like is that the being inside of you, the thing that strips away. If you stripped away your ego, like what happened to me when I took a psychedelic retreat, I stripped away I passed away, saw my funeral, and I was just left with nothing. It was like stripped away everything who I thought was me. And I think if you can get to those points in meditation where you're down to your bare bones of like, who am I? Like, what am I? And once you strip everything away, that is you. So a really cool drill that we can do. Have you got 2 minutes?
Sure.
So a really cool drill that made me realize this is that there's always something that sits behind you, right? So there's this guy, I can't remember his name, but he was having a chat with someone who was depressed. And there was this person who was coming to him. He was going, "Oh, I'm so depressed." He was like, "Oh, are you?" He was like, "I'm so depressed." And he asked the person, he said, "So is the observer depressed?" And he was like, "What?" He's like, "Well, what's the observer doing?" And he said, "Well, the observer is just observing." And then that was a massive realization for this depressed guy, that he was observing himself being depressed.
Yeah, wow.
And that just takes away the power from the depression.
Yeah.
So a really cool thing that you can do is if you imagine that you cloned yourself and put yourself there,
Yeah.
are you able to look at yourself? Just try it. And the viewers can do this as well if they're doing it. Can you kind of clone yourself, put yourself there, and then look at you, look at Jordan Hellier?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is that thing?
What is what?
What
The
is
clone?
So if you're able to clone yourself,
Yeah.
and then look at yourself as the observer, then what is the observer? What is that thing behind that consciousness? That's there, and then that's the I.
Right.
Oh, sorry, that's the self.
Okay.
So
So that's
you-
like the spiritual side.
That's like whatever it is.
Yeah,
I don't know what the fuck it is, but it's interesting to see, isn't it, that you can kind of look at yourself objectively,
Yeah.
and then there's some people who can clone themselves there and then look at that person looking at that person.
Right.
So they'll clone themselves 3 times, and there's some people who can do that 4 times. And I think after 4, 5, or 6, humans struggle to do that.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
mad.
You
Yeah.
can kind of like look at yourself from different angles
Yeah.
and create this.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that's the difference between the self and the I. When you strip away the I, that thing that we've created, that we think
Yeah.
that we are, that story that we tell ourselves, who is Dan Davis,
Yeah.
who is Jordan Hellier, the power lifter, the thing.
Yeah.
Strip that down to the bare bones. Who is Jordan Hellier?
Yeah.
Who is that I? Who is that consciousness that's just beside it?
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
Anyway, I know you got to go. Thank you so much, guys.
Cheers, mate.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
guys.
And thanks for the episode.
Yeah, cool, man.
That was good.
That's real fun.
Real good. Yeah, have you read much of Carl Jung's work?
Not a bit. Sounds very deep, mind.
It's fucking deep.